"You'll ruin the photos," my daughter said. She didn't expect what I wore that day. Before I tell you my whole story, let me know in the comments what part of the world you're listening to me from. My name is Catherine Miller, and I'm 42 years old. For 20 years, I worked as a nurse at Denver General Hospital, pulling double shifts and covering every holiday while raising 3 children alone after my husband walked out when our youngest was barely 6 months old. I remember that devastating morning when I found his note on the kitchen counter, right next to Sophie's baby formula. No explanation, just debt and 3 little faces, depending on me. That night, I cried until my eyes were swollen shut, then woke up the next morning and applied for every available shift at the hospital. I sacrificed everything so Julia could attend law school, Marcus could get his engineering degree, and Sophie could have dance lessons. I wore the same black flats for 5 years, sewing the soles back on twice, so Julia could have new interview suits. I remember standing in Target, holding a $20 foundation that I desperately needed, then putting it back because Julia needed textbooks. I cut my own hair in the bathroom mirror so Marcus could afford his engineering materials. I became invisible, showing up to school events in scrubs that still smelled like hospital disinfectant, while other mothers wore designer clothes and discussed their weekend spa appointments. During parent-teacher conferences, I'd sit in my car for 10 minutes afterward, watching those other mothers laugh and make lunch plans, while I calculated whether I had enough gas money to pick up an extra shift. My children grew up seeing me as the woman who worked, who worried, who made sure everyone else's dreams came true. They stopped seeing me as someone who had once won a modeling contest in college, who had dreamed of opening her own boutique, who used to dance until sunrise and believed the world was full of endless possibilities. When Julia announced her engagement to David, a wealthy investment banker from Boston, I was thrilled. My brilliant daughter had found someone who appreciated her intelligence and ambition. But as wedding planning began, I noticed changes that made my stomach twist with each conversation. Julia's voice shifted when discussing David's side of the family, as if they were somehow more important than ours. She carefully edited the guest list, questioning whether my sister Margaret, who had babysat my children countless times when I worked double shifts, would fit in with David's colleagues. When I suggested my best friend Linda, who had brought us groceries during our hardest months, Julia winced and said maybe we should keep the guest list more curated. 3 days before the wedding, everything changed. At the exclusive bridal boutique downtown, I arrived straight from a 12-hour hospital shift, where I'd held the hand of an elderly patient who died alone. I was emotionally drained, still wearing my scrubs under my worn cardigan, my hands still smelling faintly of hospital soap, despite washing them a dozen times. Julia looked absolutely radiant in her silk and lace gown, a masterpiece that cost more than I made in 4 months. But when she saw my reflection in the ornate mirror behind her, her face fell like I'd ruined her perfect moment. "Mom, please tell me you're not wearing scrubs to my wedding," she said, her voice carrying a tone I'd never heard before, embarrassment mixed with barely controlled frustration. I laughed, genuinely thinking she was joking. "Of course not, sweetheart. I have that beautiful navy dress from Nordstrom's. Remember? The one we picked out together? It had cost me $400. Money I'd saved by eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch for 3 months. But seeing her smile when I said yes had made every sacrifice worth it. But Julia didn't smile. Instead, her eyes darted nervously around the boutique, as if checking whether anyone important had witnessed this interaction. David's mother, Eleanor, appeared beside us like an elegant specter in her perfectly tailored Chanel suit, her smile sympathetic but calculated, the kind of expression wealthy people perfect when dealing with such unfortunate situations. "Catherine," Eleanor said, her voice dripping with honey-sweet condescension. Julia and I have been discussing the wedding photography, and we think it might be best if you consider staying more in the background during the ceremony and reception. You understand, so the professional photographer can focus on the key family moments without any distractions. The word distractions hit me like a physical slap. 20 years of working until my feet bled, of choosing their needs over mine, of building their dreams while my own gathered dust, and I had become a distraction in my own daughter's life story. Then Julia delivered the words that shattered everything. "You'll ruin the photos, Mom." David's family hired a photographer who shoots for Town and Country magazine. These pictures will be everywhere. I need everything to look cohesive. Cohesive. 20 years of love and sacrifice had made me a discordant note in my daughter's new life. Eleanor stepped forward. "Perhaps you could coordinate with the caterers. That's where mothers really shine, making sure everyone else looks perfect." Something inside me shifted. I had erased myself so completely that my own daughter saw me as support staff in her life story. But in that moment, surrounded by mirrors reflecting my tired, invisible self, I remembered who I used to be. Before becoming Catherine Miller, the struggling single mother, I was Catherine Davies, a young woman with dreams, ambitions, and style that could stop traffic. I looked at Julia one last time, memorizing her face as she chose to see me as a liability. Then I smiled, not my usual tired, placating smile, but something sharp and purposeful. "You're absolutely right, Julia. I wouldn't want to ruin your perfect day." As I walked out, Eleanor whispered, "You're doing the right thing, dear." They had no idea they'd just awakened someone they never knew existed. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in 5 years. Instead of the hospital, I drove to downtown's arts district, past coffee shops and galleries I used to frequent in my 20s when I thought the world was full of possibilities. I found Renaissance, a boutique specializing in helping women rediscover their style after life had convinced them they were invisible. Miranda, the owner, was a woman about my age with silver hair styled in an elegant bob and the kind of confident posture that comes from knowing exactly who you are. She took one look at me standing uncertainly in her doorway and smiled knowingly. "Let me guess," she said, setting down her cup of tea. "Someone important in your life has made you feel invisible, and you're ready to remind them who you really are. Am I right?" As she pulled pieces from her carefully curated inventory, I mentioned hesitantly that I used to model in college, something I hadn't told anyone in over 15 years. Her eyes lit up like she'd discovered buried treasure. "I knew it," she said, circling me with a professional eye. "You can always tell. The bone structure never changes. And that posture, honey, that never goes away. You've just been hiding it under exhaustion and self-sacrifice, standing in that 3-way mirror, wearing a stunning emerald green dress that brought out my eyes. I saw her again, the woman I used to be, the one who had turned heads walking across campus, who had confidence and dreams that extended far beyond making sure everyone else was comfortable. Miranda worked absolute magic, showing me how to style my naturally silver hair so it looked elegant rather than tired, teaching me makeup techniques that enhanced rather than masked my features. "Catherine," she said as I stared at my reflection in wonder, "you've been so busy being a mother that you forgot you're also a woman. But the beautiful thing about being our age is that we finally get to choose who we want to be next. And honey, you have so much power. You just forgot how to use it." Saturday morning arrived with perfect Colorado sunshine streaming through my bedroom windows. I took my time getting ready, savoring each moment of this transformation. The emerald dress fit like it had been made for me, and my grandmother's pearl necklace, the one Julia had deemed old-fashioned, completed the look with timeless elegance. When I saw myself in the full-length mirror, I actually gasped, This wasn't about revenge. This was pure reclamation. I arrived at Mountain View Country Club precisely when Julia would be having her pre-wedding photos taken. The venue was everything Eleanor had promised. Elegant stone architecture, manicured gardens, and filled with David's family and friends who looked like they'd stepped out of a country club catalog. As I walked through the marble lobby, I noticed conversations stopping mid-sentence. Not in the uncomfortable way I was used to, where people couldn't place the tired woman in scrubs, but in that electric way that happens when someone genuinely magnetic enters a room. The elderly gentleman behind the mahogany reception desk actually stood up straighter when I approached, his eyes widening with genuine admiration. "Mrs. Miller?" he said, checking his gilt-edged list with newfound respect. "For the Worthington Miller wedding." "That's correct," I replied, my voice steady and warm with new confidence. "I'm the mother of the bride." His face broke into the kind of smile you reserve for true elegance. "My goodness, Mrs. Miller, you look absolutely stunning. Your daughter is incredibly fortunate to have such a remarkable mother." I knocked on the bridal suite door and stepped inside. The room, filled with white roses and champagne flutes, went completely silent. Julia turned around and her face cycled through confusion, recognition, and then something approaching shock. "Mom, is that really you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the soft classical music playing in the background. Eleanor recovered first, her social training kicking in like muscle memory. "Catherine," she said, though her tone carried none of the condescension from 3 days ago. "You look absolutely radiant." But it was the photographer, a sophisticated man from New York who'd shot for Vogue, who provided the most honest reaction. "Ma'am," he said, actually lowering his expensive camera, "I don't know who you are, but you might be the most photogenic person in this room. That bone structure is absolutely incredible. You could have been a model." Julia's maid of honor, Jessica, couldn't contain herself. "Oh my God. Julia, you never told us your mum was such a knockout. I mean, seriously, where have you been hiding her?" Suddenly, I wasn't the woman who would ruin the photos. I was the woman who would elevate them. Eleanor stepped forward, recalculating. "Catherine, perhaps we should discuss photo arrangements again." I held up my hand gently. "Actually, Eleanor, I think the original arrangements were clear. I'll stay in the background, just as you suggested. We wouldn't want to disrupt cohesiveness." The irony was unmistakable. Julia's face flushed as she began understanding what had happened 3 days ago. During the ceremony, I felt eyes on me constantly. David's business associates glanced my way with admiration. At the reception, people approached me repeatedly. "You must be Julia's mother," said David's father's business partner. "You're absolutely stunning. Julia gets her beauty from you." Even David's fraternity brothers spent more time talking with me than other parents. The photographer approached during dinner. "Mrs. Miller, I've been taking candid shots of you. You have incredible natural elegance. May I include these in the final album? They'll be some of the most beautiful photos." Julia watched everything. Colleagues seeking me out. David's father discussing healthcare policy with obvious respect. Eleanor telling someone, "Catherine is absolutely lovely." When David danced with me, he said quietly, "Mrs. Miller, I owe you an apology. I didn't fully understand what Julia meant about your sacrifices until tonight. You're remarkable." Finally, Julia approached me with tears glistening in her carefully applied makeup. "Mom, can we talk privately, please?" We stepped onto the terrace overlooking the Rocky Mountains, away from the reception's orchestrated perfection. Julia took a shaky breath and looked at me with eyes full of regret and something that looked like awe. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so incredibly, devastatingly sorry. I was so terrified of not fitting into David's world, that I completely lost sight of something crucial. You're not the woman who doesn't fit in. You're the woman who makes everyone else look better just by being in the room." She paused, struggling with words that clearly came from somewhere deep in her heart. "You didn't transform tonight, did you? You've always been this incredible, elegant, powerful woman, and God, Mom, I stopped seeing you. I let my own insecurities make me ashamed of the most remarkable person I know." I reached for her hands, careful not to wrinkle her beautiful Vera Wang gown. "Julia, sweetheart, I chose to focus on being your mother for 20 years. I chose to work extra shifts instead of getting facials. I chose to buy you designer clothes instead of updating my own wardrobe. Those were my choices, and I don't regret a single one. But what happened in that boutique 3 days ago? That wasn't about clothes or photographs or social expectations. That was about basic human respect." Julia nodded, tears now flowing freely despite her makeup artist's best efforts. I know, and I'm absolutely mortified. I was so caught up in trying to impress people who ultimately don't matter that I disrespected the person who matters most. You're not just my mother. You're my hero, my role model, the strongest and most incredible woman I've ever known. And instead of being proud to show you off to the world, I tried to hide you like some shameful secret. "Julia," I said gently, taking her face in my hands the way I used to when she was small and needed comfort. "I need you to promise me something. In your marriage, in your career, in every relationship you have going forward, never let anyone make you feel like you need to diminish another person to elevate yourself. Real class, real elegance, real success. It lifts others up. It doesn't tear them down. The most beautiful thing about tonight isn't how I look. It's watching you remember what true strength really means." She hugged me then, careful not to crush her dress, but holding me tight enough that I could feel her heartbeat against mine. "I promise, Mom, and I swear I'll never forget who made all of this possible. Not just the education or the opportunities, but the values, the work ethic, the integrity. You taught me everything that actually matters, and I almost threw it all away, trying to impress people who wouldn't recognize real strength if it was standing right in front of them. Today, 6 months later, our relationship is stronger than ever. Julia calls twice weekly just to talk, joins me for spa days, and has become known for mentoring younger lawyers instead of competing with them. That weekend reminded me that motherhood doesn't require martyrdom. You can love your children while maintaining your identity, sacrifice while demanding respect, be selfless and dignified simultaneously. The wedding photos, by the way, turned out to be absolutely stunning. The photographer was absolutely right. The images of 3 generations of strong women celebrating together became the most treasured photos from the entire day. But more than that, they serve as a permanent reminder of what's possible when we refuse to accept less than we deserve, even from the people who love us most. Every time I look at those pictures, I see not just a beautiful moment, but proof that transformation is always possible when you finally decide you're worth the effort. I want to leave you with this thought. If you're a mother reading this, or if you're someone who has spent years making yourself smaller so others could shine brighter, remember that your dignity matters. Your presence matters. You matter. Don't wait for permission to take up space in your own life. Don't wait for someone else to recognize your worth before you start acting like the remarkable person you are. Stop apologizing for taking care of yourself. Stop feeling guilty for wanting to be seen and appreciated. Stop accepting crumbs when you deserve the whole feast. And if you're someone who has taken the people in your life for granted, if you've made assumptions about their value based on their appearance or their circumstances, take a closer look. The most extraordinary people are often hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone to really see them. Your mother, your sister, your friend, who always puts everyone else first. Look again. Really look. You might be shocked by the incredible person you've been overlooking. Your life is not a dress rehearsal. You don't get to practice being yourself. Show up fully. Demand respect, kindly but firmly. And never forget that real love, whether it's from family, friends, or partners, should make you feel more yourself, not less. The woman who almost stayed in the background of her daughter's wedding photos learned something that weekend that changed everything. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is simply refuse to disappear. If this story resonates with you, I'd love to hear about your own moments of reclaiming your power. Share this with someone who needs to remember their own worth. And let's start a conversation about what it really means to love ourselves while loving others. Because every woman deserves to be seen, celebrated, and respected, especially by the people she's given everything to support. Your story matters, your voice matters, and you matter more than you know.